Nerd Squad. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Today we'll be doing something a little different. The Summers family tree. What a tangled web this tree has become. Okay, well I guess we have to start somewhere, so why don't we start with the original Summers? The first one to ever appear on panel at Marvel Comics. That's right, I'm looking at you, Slim. First up, the first Summers, Cyclops. Scott Summers was the first of the Summers family tree to appear in the comics. He made his first appearance in the X-Men issue number 1 in 1963. There Scott was introduced to us as a somewhat self-doubting character who would become a leader but still struggle to see himself as worthy of love and deserving of his own happiness. Scott operated as a part of Professor X's X-Men team under the codename of Cyclops, and when Professor X was called away on a secret mission, Cyc would take his place as team leader, often maintaining a position as leader of the X-Men throughout the years, both in a field leader and commander role. Even today, at the time of this recording, Scott is currently the leader of the X-Men in the current 2022 X-Men comics, almost 60 years later. When we first met Scott, we didn't know very much about his family life or childhood, but as we got to know him, we learned more about how he came to be the Professor's golden boy and his first X-Man, and along the way, we'd also learn about his mysterious childhood and family as well. Who exactly are the Summers? At least in regards to Scott's original family tree before he grew up, he had his own family, which is its own tangled web that we'll attempt to unravel later on. Let's start with the easy stuff. Scott's parents are his father, Christopher Summers, and mother, Catherine Ann Summers. Scott was the eldest in his family, but also had a younger brother, Alex. When Scott was young, his parents seemingly perished in a plane accident. Alex and Scott were saved by their parents, who gave them a parachute and got them safely out of the plane. As a result of this near-death experience, Scott would sustain permanent brain injuries that he still suffers from to this day. Scott would not only be plagued by this, but also by nightmares of these events, which he struggled to recall with clarity as a result of the brain damage he suffered that fateful day. We later learned though that Scott's parents didn't die in that exploding plane. Instead, they were actually kidnapped, beamed aboard a Shi'ar spaceship. Christopher Summers was a US Air Force pilot, aiming to become an astronaut, but after being kidnapped by the Shi'ar and escaping them, he became a space pirate, known by the name of Corsair. Christopher escaped his captors the first time almost as soon as he was kidnapped. At least initially that's what we were kinda told, but he was recaptured after he tried to rescue his wife, Catherine, who was and killed by Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire in front of Christopher. Christopher as Corsair would find love again though with Hepzibah. Hepzibah, from an alien skunk-like race known as the Mephitisoids, would be among the group that would band together to escape Shi'ar captivity and become the starfaring group known as the Starjammers, which Corsair is the leader of, becoming like a new sort of family for Corsair. Alex and Scott, having no next of kin, would be taken in by an orphanage. But whose orphanage was it? You may have already guessed. We're talking about a surprise, often unwelcome addition to the Summers family tree, Mr. Sinister. That's right, this is where Mr. Sinister's obsession with the Summers family, chiefly Scott, started, when Alex and Scott were taken into the state home for foundlings in Nebraska, where Mr. Sinister was the head operator. He had his administrator secure the two boys. While Alex was later adopted by Andrew and Joanna Blanding, who would legally become his adoptive parents, Scott was not, and he stayed behind at the state home, where Sinister would often run tests on him in secret, becoming more and more obsessed with Scott and his genetics over time. Eventually, however, Scott would run away, running into Jack Winters, known as the superhuman criminal Jack O'Diamonds, and would later be rescued from Jack with the help of Professor X, who would then recruit Scott into his school for gifted youngsters, and later his mutant team acting as sort of a father figure to him. Alex, however, wouldn't only receive new foster parents, but also a new foster sister, Haley Blanding, who's also part of our family tree. The Blandings actually adopted Alex to help them heal from the death of their son, Todd Blanding, and in a way, they wanted him to replace the hole that Todd had left in the family, kind of also making him like be the new Todd? Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Unbeknownst to both Alex and Scott, they both had a secret younger sibling. Their sibling wasn't a secret because, you know, their parents had like kept their existence from the two boys, but because Kate actually hadn't known she was pregnant at the time of the flight. As she was killed, the baby in her womb was taken from her and placed by Emperor Deken into an incubator accelerator, which caused the baby to grow quickly into a young man. This mysterious younger brother is the man that is known as the third Summers brother, Gabriel Summers. He would become known more commonly though in the comics as Kid Vulcan and then later just as Vulcan. In fact, for many years in comic book history, readers would be left on a cliffhanger surrounding his existence, as it was first alluded to by Mr. Sinister back in 1993 in the second volume of the X-Men in issue number 23. However, it wouldn't be till 2005's X-Men Deadly Genesis series that we would actually get to meet this third brother and have his true identity revealed to us. There's also the weirdness that in Deadly Genesis it's established that Kate was only days away from having the child. Yet, in the original art where she is shown to have been made to join Emperor Deken's harem and then she's killed, she looks very non-pregnant. There is also the fact that it mentions she was only 2 months pregnant when first abducted, which actually applies that Corsair's initial escape attempt didn't actually happen as soon as maybe we originally thought it did, or it was originally implied, if she was only days away from giving birth, so he would actually have been in captivity then for a few months. Aside from that weirdness, we would also learn that Kate also had several children with Emperor Deken, that is, genetically speaking. Deken had these offspring created with the hopes of expanding the genetic potential of the Shi'ar Empire by introducing different kinds of genetics into it. When he was young, Adam was taken from the lab he was created in by Joneth, who became his adoptive father, hiding Adam's true origins from him. Adam would grow up and later become known as Adam Naramani, or codename Adam X. And originally, as he appeared shortly after Sinister alluded to Scott having multiple brothers, not just Alex, it was believed that he was the one, other than Alex, that Sinister was referring to. Adam X was a half-brother to Alex and Scott, but later Gabriel would be implied to be, you know, that extra brother, although Sinister could have been talking about both or either for all we know, really. Adam is of course both tied to the Shi'ar royal family and to the Summers family tree, as he would later learn. Between the three brothers, each had their very own different life experiences, which would lead them to having different kinds of families. So before we move on, let's go forward and talk about some of their kids. The Summers children and weird relations. I feel like for the Summers brothers' families, it is easier for me to go in reverse order from youngest to oldest. So let's start with Vulcan. Vulcan, after being rapidly aged to his prime years, was enslaved by the Shi'ar and sent to Earth to serve the Emperor's envoy there, but instead ended up escaping and was found by Moira McTaggart, who took him in and had him join her own roster of mutants. His story training with Moira is introduced in Deadly Genesis. Vulcan is known for being the most powerful of the Summers children. Vulcan would end up in space after being recruited to a mission to save the original X-Men and kind of failing somewhat. Vulcan would return to the Shi'ar Empire, end up in prison, freed, married to Deathbird, and later on would also become Emperor of the Shi'ar Empire. Which, yes, this does mean that the Naramanis would have become his in-laws, including Deken, who killed his mother, imprisoned his father, and enslaved him. Wow, that's a messed up family right there. Which also makes Adam X both Vulcan's half-brother and his nephew. Pretty wild stuff. Deathbird and Vulcan would have a baby together, although we still don't know that child's name, if it's still around somewhere. Deathbird being a mother was even acknowledged as recently as the 4th volume of New Mutants issue number 5 from 2020. And well, that's really all there is to Vulcan thus far. Now let's talk about Alex. Alex would grow up to become the mutant hero and sometimes villain known as Havoc, and it's no wonder he sometimes turns a little evil considering how rough his life was both leading up to joining the X-Men and even after that happened. Alex was given his codename and original costume by Larry Trask after being taken captive by his Sentinels. Alex would attempt to refuse to join the X-Men multiple times, but eventually it kind of just became inevitable. Originally, Sinister believed his power levels to be greater than Scott's. Initially, Mr. Sinister actually suppressed Alex's mutant ability when it first manifested when he was a child. He put psi blockers on him and wiped his memory of the incident that triggered it, as Alex's powers were considered to be too uncontrollable. They would only be triggered again later when he ran into an X-gene copy of himself in mutant-human hybrid, the Living Monolith. Yes, the Living Monolith is here! Amit Abdul, who had been mutated by Apocalypse using Alex's DNA, making him like a genetic brother of sorts who was psychically linked to Alex. Alex would only have one daughter that we know of, Surprisingly, not with any of his more popular romantic ships, but instead with Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp. They had a daughter in an alternate timeline which has since been wiped from existence. She was pretty adorable and awesome, and her name was Katie, or Catherine Summers. In typical Alex Summers must suffer Marvel fashion, after having half his face melted by Kang, he is the only one left with memories of Katie, so he can't even talk to anyone about it. Janet doesn't even remember being with him or their daughter. I still kinda hope one day that Katie will get to return via the main timeline somehow. Finally, let's talk about the mad complexity that is Scott Summers' family tree, with Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, and beyond. Although Scott was always sweet on Jean, she became the Phoenix and later Dark Phoenix, seemingly dying, sacrificing herself to save others once she turned dark. It was after her apparent death that Scott met Madeline Pryor, spelled MadelynepRyor, probably one of the most commonly misspelled names in all of comics. Madeline happened to look just like Jean. What a coincidence! Scott fell in love with her and left the X-Men to settle down with Maddie. Together, the two had a baby, Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, initially referred to in the comics as Baby Christopher. However, their relationship started to deteriorate when Scott decided to return to the new, old X-Men team, X-Factor, after Jean Grey was revealed to be alive and well, herself joining the team. Jean hadn't died, it turned out, but was simply in a stasis cocoon at the bottom of Jamaica Bay, while the Phoenix adopted her form and personality, appearing as her, later seemingly perishing. But of course, this is the Phoenix Force, so we know that that is not true. And, you know, it gets even weirder than this. The Phoenix Force, along with Mr. Sinister, were later revealed to be like parents to Madeline, who it turned out was a clone of Jean Grey created from a piece of the Phoenix Force. Surprise, surprise! No wonder she looked almost identical to Jean. This revelation, in combination with Scott abandoning her, would drive Madeline mad. Feeling abandoned, she would ally herself with Alex Summers and also take him for her lover. He would become known as her Goblin Prince, and she would become the villain known as the Goblin Queen, aiming to retrieve and later seemingly sacrifice Christopher, who had been taken from her by Mr. Sinister. And it gets somehow even weirder than that. After Maddie was dealt with, Jean would be given memories of raising baby Christopher, so psychically he was like her own child. Baby Christopher would later be taken by Apocalypse, saved by the clan Ascani, cloned, and later grow up across time, becoming a time traveler who we all know as Nathan Summers, or Cable. Nathan's evil clone, who was raised by Apocalypse, now also weirdly, I guess somehow in this family tree, would be known as Strife. Cable would rescue the mutant Messiah, meet a woman named Hope, who he fell in love with and married, and name the adopted baby mutant Messiah Hope Summers, after his wife and her adoptive mother. His daughter Hope had a biological mother before that who died, which we now know was named Louise Spaulding. Before being with Hope Summers though, Cable would be married to Aaliyah Dayspring, his first wife, with whom he had a son known as Tyler Dayspring, aka Genesis. But not Apocalypse's wife Genesis, or Apocalypse's younger clone Genesis, or Apocalypse's alternate universe son Genesis. None of those Geneses. In a weird twist, Aaliyah was also an initiate in the clan Ascani, who originally saved Nathan when he was a baby. The other weird thing about the clan Ascani is Mother Ascani, who saved Nathan as a baby, is also part of the Summers family tree, being a daughter of an alternate reality pairing of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. So Nathan as a baby was actually saved by his alternate reality stepsister, or you know, just sister if you consider Jean to truly also be his mother. Let's rewind back a little bit to after the X-Men beat Madeline Pryor during the events of Inferno. Scott would end up later married following his disastrous relationship with Maddie, of which he is actually a good deal responsible for, to be honest, to Jean Grey, his first love. They would not have children in the main continuity, but as we already know with Mother Ascani, had children together in alternate realities. While I won't mention all of those children here, two important ones in regards to their interactions with the main continuity are Rachel Summers and Nate Grey. Sometimes known as Ascani, or Prestige, or Phoenix, or Marvel Girl, Rachel Summers is from the same reality as Mother Ascani, Earth 811, the Days of Future Past reality. And Mother Ascani is actually not necessarily an alternate version of her, as Rachel was actually split into separate beings across time when she sacrificed herself to save her teammate Captain Britain. Rachel is immensely powerful and previously lived on the blue area of the moon in the Krakoan habitat known as the Summer House. Not residing in the Summer House on the blue area of the moon is Nate, or Nathan Grey. Nathan Grey actually has a psychic link with his alternate reality self Cable, and is like Cable if he wasn't infected with the techno-organic virus, making him kind of like a more perfect being. Nate Grey is actually the genetic offspring of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, and was made by his reality's Mr. Sinister, who there is just known as Sinister. Although he was also raised by by his reality's forge, so that's kinda like his foster dad. Nate Gray goes by the codename X-Man and is basically like a mutant version of Jesus. He hails from the reality of Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse reality. And that's really all the time we have for today. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening to me do my splaining. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.